All participants will be in a listen-only mode. Should you wish to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Tuesday, December 6, 2016. I will now like to turn the conference over to Terry Holliquist. Please go ahead.
Hello everyone, this is Tony Holliquist, Professional Development Associate, and on behalf of NACE, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Applicant Tracking Systems, What Career Advisors Need to Know. During the webinar, you may use the chat function in the lower left corner to ask questions. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenters, Heather Krasna, Assistant Dean of Career Services at Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health, and Cheryl Minnick, Career Counselor and Internship Director at the University of Montana.
Thank you, Henley, and good morning, listeners. I'm Cheryl from University of Montana, and I'm excited to share with you today what I've learned over the last 10 years about applicant tracking systems while doing research, being trained by ATS representatives, completing corporate ATS webinars, and actually using many of them to help students apply for internships and jobs.
Hi, and I'm Heather from Columbia University School of Public Health, and I'm just as excited to share with you my experience with ATS, which includes one-on-one interviews with representatives from 21 different industry leaders, including ATS vendor systems like iSIM, Silk Road, JobsBite, IBM Connexa, etc., different parsing engines, which we will talk about, and many recruiters and researchers who focus on ATS vendor software. Today, we will be discussing the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, and the future of ATS. We will offer hints for crafting resumes to avoid the dreaded ATS black hole. We will provide a 3-page handout of specific considerations when crafting resumes to get through the ATS, and finally, of course, a Q&A period at the end of the presentation. Well, we have a lot to cover today, so Cheryl, tell us, what exactly is an applicant tracking system?
Sure, thanks, Heather. An applicant tracking system is software. It's software that's used for talent recruitment, performance management, learning and development, and compensation management. The software can be purchased from a third-party provider and embedded into a company's computer system or hosted by the vendor and then accessed via internet. They've grown in popularity since their launch in 1988 for government use and in 1996 for industry use because of the following 14 reasons. They streamlined hiring technology through task automation. They do about the work of about 4 people. They manage the entire hiring life cycle from job post to job termination. They post hundreds of jobs to hundreds of job boards to reach more qualified candidates across the globe. They store resumes and letters so recruiters can search the resume database via keywords. They create applicant flow reports, predictive recruiting metrics, like for instance, how many applicants applied. They manage applicants' information. For instance, was it an employee referral? What was the hire source? And it also holds screening notes that the HR recruiter can make. The applicant tracking systems, they scan, score, and rank resumes based upon Boolean logic and semantic search. They can screen applicants by geography to find a local candidate. They can add knockout questions. One of the questions you might see often is, are you legally able to work in the U.S.? That's called a knockout question. They embed assessments, and perhaps you've helped a student and they've had to take a personality assessment. Burlington Northern, for their engineers, have math assessments. Target uses a behavioral assessment that's embedded. They also have internal screening libraries where an HR recruiter could go to the library and just pick out an assessment to use. They send candidates emails. They can delay and personalize emails so it actually appears that someone looked at your resume when perhaps they didn't. They can set up interviews. Now, we have not come across any applicant tracking system yet that allows candidates to self-schedule the interview. So I think that might be in the future. They embed EEO questions to ensure compliance with EEOC and OSCCP. They allow candidates to subscribe to job posting alerts and view their application status via any mobile access. They integrate electronic references now, so if you've helped a student apply and the student is asked to insert their reference's name, phone number, and email, it might be that that system is going to email a reference check form to the applicant. So you'll want to make sure they type in that email correctly. It can include background checks, pre-job exams, video interviews, and even more. Applicant tracking systems are said to secure top talent and complete new hiring onboarding. For instance, submitting a parking pass, completing OSHA video training, setting up direct deposit. So why would you not use an applicant tracking system if it does that? Oh, the work of 4 people, it never gets sick, it never goes to sleep, it works during holidays. Heather, when one of our listeners is helping a student apply for a job or an internship, how would they know if the company is actually using an applicant tracking system? And how would they know which one the company is using? Can you share that?
Sure. Great question, Cheryl. So you can be not 100% guaranteed that a company is using an applicant tracking system, but a lot of them are using it. It's reported by the Wall Street Journal that about 90% of Fortune 500 companies use one of the 222 different ATS, which I think is how we'll refer to this going forward, Applicant Tracking System, or ATS, on the market to scan, parse, rank, store, and migrate large numbers of applications. Some smaller organizations might not be using an ATS. They might still be accepting resumes, probably through email, maybe even like they did in the olden days through fax and mail, but mostly email. And there are some companies that are still using an older ATS because it's just hard and expensive to replace a system. And as you can see from this pie chart, you can find that Taleo is still one of the biggest in the market, so you'll see this one all the time. And there's a number of other ones that come up very often. You have Connect the Brass Ring, which is owned by IBM. You have JobSite, iSIMS, SuccessFactors, Silk Road, etc. And there's new ones on the market all the time. There's even ones that are free or have some limited features that are free. To figure out which ATS a company uses, you would really just look at the URL when you have a student going to apply. So just as you can see highlighted here, if you look at the web address, you can see that Target is using Taleo right here, whereas another company might be using iSIMS, which is right in the name, or you'll see at the bottom of the page, powered by iSIMS, or powered by whatever it is. Now, this isn't guaranteed to tell you exactly which ATS is being used, because there's actually now some ATS systems which allow you to apply via email, but your email application will sort of be funneled right into the ATS. So you, the applicant, might not actually know for sure if it's going through an ATS. But certainly if you see when you go to apply on the internet that there's one of these vendor names right in the web address, that's a pretty solid clue that you're going to an ATS system. And a hint for the listeners before I forget, if you want to really learn the nitty-gritty of how an ATS works, you can go into YouTube and you'll find many video tutorials many times for how to learn these systems. There's training videos for a number of these different vendors, and you can find screenshots. Sometimes you can even download a whole PDF user guide, which is designed for the recruiters using the ATS. So there's a lot of information out there on how to navigate these systems.
Learning that information is really important as a career counselor to do our homework for our students. Some of my students have called the applicant tracking systems absolute time suck software, and sometimes I feel their pain when I've helped them apply for jobs and internships. Each ATS application screen seems to be different, and sometimes it's a little frustrating. Some can time you out. Some are cumbersome legacy systems written on outdated code, but it is what it is, and that's what we have. With the 222 applicant tracking systems on the market as of this past October, Heather and I can't tell you this is exactly how they all work for sure, because each company can tailor their applicant tracking system to their specific needs. For instance, like you did to your cell phone. So I have a new iPhone 6, so does my daughter and my younger daughter. Our screens are completely set up differently. I look at their main screen, it doesn't look anything like mine. They've moved and deleted and pre-installed applications. They've downloaded applications. They put applications on my phone I don't know how to use. They have games and features on theirs that are unique to their needs, but they're not on all cell phones. I even have stuff on my cell phone that I'm not using. Probably some cool tool because I don't know about it. Like I just learned that you can change your 6-number passcode back to a 4-number passcode or fingerprint passcode. So this is where the mixed messages and conflicting information originate about applicant tracking systems and how to create resumes to get through them. I could say, for cell phones, all passcodes are 6 digits. And someone would say, oh no, mine's 4 digits. And then my husband would say, nope, mine's a fingerprint passcode. Do you see how the mixed messages start? It's the same phone, it's just set up and programmed 3 different ways for unique needs. So as we present today on applicant tracking systems, and as you present to students in the future, the best example to give them is a cell phone example because they understand that. Because we can't say they all work in one particular way. So today, Heather and I will share with you the best practices so that you can increase your knowledge of applicant tracking systems and be more confident when you're helping students so their applications don't fall into the dreaded black hole. Heather, is that a black hole? Can you tell us about that?
Sure thing. So this is just another screenshot from one of the many applicant tracking systems. So you could call it a black hole of rejection. It's estimated that about 75% of candidates are rejected by the ATS because the candidate does not write their resume for both the human and the robotic eye. They forget to tailor their resume to the job specifically, or they used old school advice about formatting, like using an objective statement, certain other things. And one of our slides toward the end will go into much more detail specifically about formatting and how that can cause all sorts of interesting havoc when you're applying on an ATS. So in spite of qualified candidates being rejected from an ATS, they're still being used and often being used to screen the resumes as well as all the other functions because it's just easier for recruiters to manage when they have huge numbers of resumes. And the resumes can be tracked by application date, application source, the status of the candidate. You can track all the contacts you've had with that candidate, whether it's an internal or an external hire. And then the HR person can create reports like what's the return on investment for this particular source, or I spent X amount on a job posting, was it useful and effective? And recruiters can uniquely program their ATS to track data for each job for their particular company, and they're just faster, cheaper, programmable, and they remember everything. So even though there's a pitfall, and recruiters are very well aware that there's sometimes a pitfall of good candidates being overlooked because of the ATS, and we'll try to talk about how to navigate that and avoid it. So even though there's this pitfall, they're still being used all the time. So Cheryl, I bet many of our listeners want to know more about keywords, which is one of the ways to prevent yourself going into that black hole. So why don't you tell us about keywords? What are they? How do you find them? How do you use them in resumes to get through the ATS?
Oh, sounds good. I love a good keyword phrase. Love them. Keywords are used to tailor a resume. So tailored resumes are going to rank higher on an applicant tracking search. Keywords become like SEO for a resume through the keywords. They can be found in, so listeners, really pay attention to the job qualification section, the preferred qualification section, and required education section. Really take those sections apart and dissect them and look for what might be the key word. We'll never know exactly what it is. We'll have to use an educated guess. Keywords are going to be skills specific to the job or the role and are usually hard skills, not a soft skill like communication or teamwork, but hard skills, perhaps like audit, forensic audit, or Java, something that's a hard skill. I'll often still tell students, It's a hard skill, hard to learn, hard to do, hardly anyone has it on their resume. Most ATS will score resumes based on an exact keyword or keyword phrase match, a keyword equivalent, like Java developer or Java. Applicant tracking systems can compare all similar jobs to find keywords that are unique to that type of job, perhaps maybe an industry-specific software technical term, or some kind of special indicator, maybe a brand competitor. For enterprise rent-a-car, Hertz is a special indicator. So sometimes it might even be a specialized school, maybe Harvard. Applicant tracking systems will score resumes also based on the amount of times the keyword appears in the resume, or how close to the top of the page the word appears, meaning how new is that skill. So that's why, another reason why we use headlines and taglines at the top of a resume. You can see on the slide, one candidate was missing 10 keywords. So this is internal from an applicant tracking system. You can see the keywords that they missed. They lost 10 points for not having those words on their resume. If they don't organically know that information and have those hard skills, then they shouldn't have been in the applicant pool. If they do have those skills should have been on their resume. So once again, we need to dissect the job posting, get a yellow highlighter out, and try to find all the key words with our students. Here's a hint when you're working with students. If the job posting lists Bachelor of Science and it is spelled out as an educational requirement, it may be best to spell out Bachelor of Science on the resume. If the job posting lists a BS in electrical engineering, then abbreviate to BS. We try to mirror as closely as possible. Some systems understand BS as Bachelor of Science. Some don't. So which system are they using? I don't know. But we want to make sure that we try to mirror as closely as possible without parity. Here's another hint. Avoid objective statements. They don't optimize resumes. Rather, in its place, use a headline denoting the student's brand, title, or targeted role. For instance, career goal, tax accountant, or maybe entry-level accountant. Then under that, maybe add 2 or 3 taglines or a 3 to 5 line career summary filled with keywords to denote the student's match and return on investment. If you look at the slide, you'll see one of the pictures has actually highlighted some keywords. So these slides, these screenshots are from the inside of Applicant Tracking Systems so that you can see what the recruiter sees. Heather, can you tell us how the Applicant Tracking System can even figure out a keyword?
Sure. So here's another screenshot of how certain words are being highlighted. So ATS systems use a number of different types of technology to look for keywords and to sort of split apart the resume and chunk it into different categories according to what the system thinks is the location where certain types of experience belong internally in their system. So basically, one of the things that they use, which the recruiter can use, is called Boolean Search. Boolean Search, you can Google this and find it, and it's deceptively simple and yet very complex. So a good ATS will allow a recruiter to do some interesting and fancy searches. So they can do a search with the word and, using all capital letters to do an and search where they're looking for, let's say, marketing and social media, let's say, and they want an exact phrase of social media, so they use quotation marks around that, and they're only going to find candidates that have both of those terms on their resume. They can even exclude words, like they want sales and not marketing, or whatever it might be. And they can come up with all sorts of and, or not combinations to find candidates who have very specific combinations of keywords, keyword phrases, or even search strings. So the Boolean search is very logical, and when I was briefly trained as a recruiter and I got certified as a social sourcing recruiter, we spent almost all our time on how to learn Boolean search. And so this is something that's worth learning as a career counselor or career coach, because you can help your students understand how these terms are going to be used so that they can get discovered by using the right phrases and terms. So as an example on this screenshot, here's a sales professional, and this slide shows recruitment for sales, and that keyword, sales is searched for, and it appeared 11 times. If the job posting includes data analysis, that might be a phrase, and sometimes the ATS is not going to be smart enough to look for the word analyze or analysis all by itself. So if you were to do something like, say, conducted analysis of complex data, some ATS systems are very smart and will be able to figure out that that is relevant, and other ones will not find that, because if the recruiter searched for the exact phrase data analysis, that will not pop up. So these systems are getting smarter and smarter and coming up with fancier ways to figure out which words are relevant and what they mean. And it's coming closer and closer to being more like a human being reading all these resumes. So for instance, Monster Sixth Sense uses artificial intelligence like Google does. So if you type into Google MBA, it knows that you mean Master of Business Administration. Not every ATS can really translate words like humans, so again, err on the safe side and use the exact phrases. So for students to try to figure out the keywords, you would go through the job description with that student and highlight all the words that might be keywords, which might be technical skills, proper nouns, or phrases and terms that are repeated in the posting, in the job posting. And you could look for all the active verbs, maybe highlight those in green in a different color for words like support, assist, contribute, and then use those to start your bullets. Another example with how to find keywords, you don't have to list every single iteration, just use the ones that are relevant. For example, again, if the keyword is accountant, you don't need to put account management or account supervision, because that's actually a different skill. So you really want to dissect the job posting and make sure you understand not just the requirements, but also the job function, the job duties. And you can go deeper with this and look for languages, cultural traits, technical skills, ability to relocate, and so forth, to see if there's a way to figure out if these are keywords. You can also copy and paste the job posting into a word cloud like Wordle.net, and there's also other sites you can use to figure out which words are being, key words that are being repeated. And you'll never know exactly what the secret sauce is and which keyword is going to be used, because again, every recruiter is different and every ATS is programmed a little bit differently.
So for Heather, for giggles, let's say that we've tailored a student's resume and it is a perfect match to the job posting. So perfect, the student scores 99%. Inside the applicant tracking system, as you can see from this slide, there'll be a score. So this student's 99% score could be represented by a number, 1 to 10, a percentage, a horizontal bar graph, dancing flames, yes, dancing flames, waving flags, or stars, like this slide of Capstone ATS. If you look, it looks like Andrew's having a great day, a 4-star day. His resume scored 4 of 5 stars, more stars than any other candidate. If a resume were to score a 0 or an NA, or no stars at all, it could have been that A, they had no keyword match at all, or B, they uploaded their resume in a non-compatible file. For instance, a PDF or a template. Some applicant tracking systems, mainly the newer ones and more sophisticated ones, can read PDFs and templates, but the majority cannot read them. What they can read is editable text, like Word. So, again, like Heather said, let's play to the most common denominator. Upload all resumes in Word. Not Word Perfect, not PDF, not templates. ATS see a PDF as just one big picture. It's not editable, they can't scan it, they can't score it. It's a picture, non-editable document. So we want to make sure that we upload in a doc, DOC or DCO, or a docs file, one or the two. If you ever help a student apply for a job or an internship, and the student has abbreviations all over their resume, look at the job posting. Is it using abbreviations? What we want to do is make sure that we're using the right phrase on the resume that's going to mirror the job posting. So if there's abbreviations in the job posting, then I guess you can use them on the resume, but be very, very cautious. Sometimes in a resume, if I am not sure, I'll put BS in parentheses and then spell out Bachelor of Science after that. Here's another hint to help students score higher. Use each company's specific job vocabulary. For instance, I have 2 students right now. Both are applying for sales managers jobs. One is applying at L'Oreal and one is applying at Apple. They have the same major, they took the same courses. They're applying for the same job, 2 different companies, 2 different applicant tracking systems. L'Oreal wants a student to have experience with, and I quote, seasonal marketing plans. But Apple wants a student to have experience with marketing campaign content. Both of those phrases really mean marketing plans. But if the student typed the word marketing plan in, the applicant tracking system might not recognize that that's what it's looking for. So we want to use the company's exact terminology if we can and be organic and always maintain the student's integrity. We never lie in a resume. So hopefully the screenshot gives you an idea of what it looks like in the inside of one particular applicant tracking system. This is Capstone. So you can actually see the people have scored stars. Lucky Andrew, huh?
Exactly. So I'm just going to talk for 1 second about the technology that's behind the scenes, which is kind of calculating these keywords, which is called a parsing engine. And I didn't know these existed until I started diving in and talking to all of these ATS companies, because then they said, well, our parsing engine is the one that actually reads the text of the resume. And there's actually all kinds of new technology, which we'll talk about in a second, all the new wave stuff. The old-fashioned keyword-only search, which is still very common in ATS, is just reading the number of keywords and giving you a sort of number score. But there's now fancier versions where they're using what's called a statistical parser, a grammar-based parser, or a semantic contextual search parser. Essentially what these systems are doing, and these are systems like IBM Watson, which is powering, I think, Nexa now, is that they can search not just for the word exactly by itself, but where is it in the context of the whole phrase, the whole resume. It can actually see, okay, this word was used in a job, and it's reading where the job is located on the resume, and that job has a certain number of months and years attached because you're putting the dates of employment. So the ATS will say, okay, Heather has 5 years of experience as a recruiter and 2 years of experience as a technical writer, because that's where those phrases are on her resume, for example. And it'll just score you that they get 5 years experience on this and not that. So behind the scenes, there's this whole other technology, and there's these companies like Sovereign, Burning Glass, Daxtra, Data Frenzy, Hireability, and so on, that are sort of like the wizard behind the curtain. And so another thing to know is the reason this may matter is that these systems are kind of looking for which section to put that experience into. So you want to make sure your students are using really commonly used section titles. So instead of saying training and educational background, you would want to just use education, or instead of career contributions or some other thing, you would say work experience. So try to be kind of standardized in the section titles, because then that system will understand, oh, okay, this is the work experience section. Similarly, these systems are not that great with functional resumes, because they don't know what to do when there's no dates attached to the work experience bullets. So again, you may be working with career changers, and I suggest, and this is kind of the bottom line of this presentation to me, is yes, you can optimize your resume, yes, you can use the keywords, but for certain candidates, they shouldn't just apply on the ATS. They need to do a lot more networking and get a referral, because the ATS is not going to give them justice in terms of their experience. If they have an outside-the-box background or a gap of employment, or they're using a functional resume, it's tricky to just be discovered on an ATS unless you really fit very clearly with what the job is asking for. So again, I would say avoid the functional style and make sure your section titles are really clear. You can also look for keywords by going into LinkedIn and looking at the skills that people have who work at that company. So if there's repeated skills, you look at 10 profiles of people at that company in that job function, and they all happen to speak French, or they all know how to use Salesforce. Well, that's a clue to your student that they need to earn the right to put that keyword on their resume. You can't just put Salesforce if you don't know it, obviously. So it's just something that's behind the scenes that's going on. And you could see, again, another example of how, for this job scan resume analysis, somebody was missing some of the skills. And this website is allowing a candidate to kind of compare their resume with the job posting to see what you're missing. And there's actually a few other tools that are in the market now where a student can plug their resume in and plug the job description in, and it'll say, okay, you matched this job by 50%, so you have to redo your resume to match it as best you can, within reason, right? So Daxtra, DAXTRA.com is another place you could use to match their job and the resume, and Resumate, RESUNATE. Those are systems that students can also use to try to figure out how much. Cheryl, what's next in that comparison and finding the match?
Well, applicant tracking systems are like eHarmony for recruiters. They take the lottery out of love and the lottery out of hiring. And like Heather said, it's more than just a resume being uploaded. It's the networking, and it's the referral. If you were online and looking online at some guy to date, you'd be like, okay, he likes dogs. Okay, but if your friend said, hey, my boyfriend has this great guy, he loves dogs and cats, you might say, oh, because you're going to take a referral from someone you know more strongly than maybe someone you look at online. The same with the recruiters. So while online looks pretty good, if it's online and it's supported by a networking referral, it might even get a longer look. It might get a date, i.e. an interview. But applicant tracking systems provide these numbers. They're metric driven. It's predictive data, just like a FICO score. A FICO score is a score of your credit worthiness. So if you score a 67 out of 100 for a job, that's your employability score. FICO scores aren't fair, they aren't flawless, and neither are the applicant tracking scores. So what we want to do is try to be as an organic and honest as we can with the resumes. We want to make sure that we have keywords littered throughout. No, not in white font. No, not in footers. No, not in headers. No, not in the margins. Actually, be honest and truthful, and they should be in the resume. Because the recruiter is looking for a job match for the strongest candidate to that. So they use the applicant tracking system for that first look, that first scan, to send them only the top 10, the top 5 applicants. So what are they scanning for? We're not sure. That's why we look through the preferred qualifications and the required qualifications. That's where the information is for that particular employer. So when I lecture to students on our campus, so one student will always raise their hand and say, then I'm going to have to do a resume for every job. And I say, bingo, exactly. Young man, if you dated 3 girls and you were taking them all to the movies and all to dinner, and you knew Susie was a vegan, are you taking her to a steakhouse? He always says no. And I say, you're customizing the date for a better end product. So we need to customize the resume a tad too. We can do that by making sure that our bullets are not simply task bullets, but they are accomplishment bullets. Accomplishment bullets are CAR or STAR style. I use CAR, content, action, result. Let's take a look at a bullet for a receptionist that is simply task-oriented. Her bullet said, answered phones. The second bullet, greeted customers. Well, I know that. You're a receptionist and that's what they do. You didn't tell me any more about yourself, so I'm not impressed by you. Let's look at an accomplishment bullet. That will be car style, content, action, result. So let's redo that bullet. Managed, always starting with an active verb, managed a 250-line switchboard, transferring calls to realtors and brokers to support the sale of $75 million of bare land, residential, and commercial properties in fiscal year 2015. That was the same student. Do you see the power in numbers and the power in an accomplishment bullet? I was also able to litter in some key words: brokers, realtors, residential, and commercial properties. Very important to teach your students to do accomplishment bullets. Another thing you can do is, this is a hint for career counselors, is go into LinkedIn and you can query LinkedIn, like I can query Nike and then University of Montana and find all of the Grizz alum that are actually at Nike. Then I can email them or send them a LinkedIn message or a Facebook message and ask, hey, I'm working with a student. Can you give us a little hint about the application process or the job or the internship? And once we talk, I'll say, well, would you mind recommending? Could the student, use you as a recommendation? I hook the two up. Pretty soon the student has an internal recommendation. So when an applicant online shows internal recommendation, that's much stronger than when a student or a candidate will just click open, I found the job browsing the internet. So that's another little hint, is to use LinkedIn to get some more information from your own alumni. You'll be shocked how many people are working that you probably even know. Heather, I know applicant tracking systems are changing and improving, and there's more on the market. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening?
Sure. I'll just be quick because I know we want to make sure there's time for questions. So a lot of new things are going on. I did mention about how the parsing itself has been changing and hopefully improving. There's also eHarmony, which everybody knows is for dating, and they created a group called Elevated Careers, which is designed to create compatibility matching technology and applying those same analytical methods to match candidates to jobs using personality and work values, and that's Elevated Careers. So that's a new interesting development. I spoke to an analyst at Forrester Research, market research company, and she looked at hundreds of ATS programs, and she was saying that some of the new wave is in video-based matches, culture assessments, and kind of gamifying this whole process to make it more fun for the candidates. There's also a movement away from the old-fashioned ATS where you're ending up having to retype information and make sure it's correct, but just being able to apply with one click. And also integrating, obviously, LinkedIn as well as other social media so you could apply with LinkedIn with one click. There's even some fun things happening with data and predictive analytics. So as an example, Bullhorn, which is a company that mostly works with third-party recruiters, they launched a technology which can predict when a passive candidate might be about to actively start job seeking based on how often they update their LinkedIn profile. Because it's using analytics to say, oh, well, you just updated and asked for 5 recommendations. I wonder if you're not happy in your job right now. Very interesting predictive technology. Another thing they're doing is using data from the best hires that have been hired into a company and using data on past open requisitions, looking at Glassdoor reviews, and so on to figure out how hard it will be to fill a particular position, how hard it's going to be to find a qualified candidate for certain positions, and then using the existing talent pool, which is all the candidates that might have applied as well as maybe those that follow you on LinkedIn and so on, to kind of pre-identify the best candidates for an open position. And even matching with the candidates who've been the most successful on past positions, looking at their performance reviews, looking at turnover data, and matching that with candidates because they're saying, well, these are the candidates we hired who did the best on the job, and so let's find people that look like them and finding candidates based on those. And finally, they're even integrating social activities, social media activities, into whatever you actually submitted when you applied to kind of predict a little bit more about the candidate. So there's so much happening, it's hard to keep up with.
Sure is. It's kind of crazy out there. I want to backtrack to what I said just a minute ago because I don't think I was very clear. What I meant about using LinkedIn is to network with alums, to learn about the job, to learn about the company more. Usually alumni, especially younger alumni, are very helpful with their classmates or other alumni to tell them a little bit about the company, the job, and connect with them on LinkedIn, maybe email them or call them off social media and talk to them. I did not mean write a recommendation on LinkedIn for an unknown student. That's not what I meant, so I'm sorry I was unclear about that. Let's look at this slide. This slide is crazy, but it's an internal headshot. It's an internal screenshot from an applicant tracking system, Bullhorn and Workable, that show you how they're actually integrating and taking out of LinkedIn the photographs. So there's the headshot and the top of the LinkedIn content, and it's imported into the applicant tracking system. So for career counselors, it's super important to remind students of their digital footprint, to dust it off and make it look good, because it's being embedded, and it can be embedded in some. So let's look at the next slide. Another newer feature is how they can look at Facebook and LinkedIn and embed that in the applicant tracking system. So yes, the applicant tracking system can be preloaded by personal data like education, years of experience, to auto-populate different fields. Not all applicant tracking systems do this. Some do, some don't. But we have to play to the most common denominator. So for career counselors like myself, it's really important that we tell the students, build your LinkedIn profile to support your resume. It should be similar to the resume. It should be as robust as you can possibly build it as a student. You want to grab the recruiter's interest by using keywords so that they can do a SEO search. You want the student's brand to be articulated pretty strongly. We warn students about social media, but it's getting even more important to show them these slides and show them. Once students see this, then they truly understand that maybe a picture of them with 2 beer cans by either side is probably not the best. Here's another little helpful hint for resume creation. If a student's name on his resume is Bill Smith, it should be Bill Smith everywhere. So we want to make sure that the name is consistent. If a student is earning his CPA, he's an accounting major, do not use the name Bill Smith, CPA. In some, not all, applicant tracking systems, CPA will become the last name, Smith the middle, Bill the first. Same thing with PhD after a name, if you're applying through an ATS. So once again, this is where we can use the headline to put certified public accountant in a headline rather than CPA after the name. So it's just a little hint for you there. Heather, you were going to talk a little bit now about what's happening with video cover letters and video interviews.
Definitely. So again, the cost of hiring it can be very expensive. So for example, iSIMS has calculated that it's at least $4,500 on an average to hire a new employee, and that doesn't even include all the time spent scanning resumes, conducting interviews, the travel expense for recruiters to come to your campus and have a meeting with your students. So to save time and money, more companies are now integrating videos and video cover letters, video interviews, pre-screening on videos into the application or as a pre-screen. And so you might have already seen with some of your students that they're now getting pre-screening, not just by Skype, which has been around a long time now, but things like Blue Jeans and Zoom and a number of other software systems that are allowing for that first initial impression to be done on the student's time using their video. So we have to coach students not just on regular interviewing, but video-based interviewing, so that they're aware that you now have to a little bit be a filmmaker and consider the lighting and consider the background, and make sure that if you're going to be doing one of these video-based interviews, that you are sitting in an uncluttered, nice-looking space and not in a dorm room where there's a lot of dirty laundry in the background of your image. And so you have to think about all these other pieces of the puzzle. And you'll see now iSIMS is letting candidates use either desktop or mobile webcam to record a short personal video showcasing why they're the best fit for the job. And so we want to work with our students on the video because that's only going to keep growing. I don't think that's going to slow down. Another thing I wanted to also mention and go back to is to talk about that the resume and cover letter, they have to appeal to two different audiences. They do have to get through the ATS, but they also are going to be read by human beings, and so they have to work for a human eye also. So this is why when I did speak to recruiters and I asked them how they used ATS, they often basically were very hesitant to say that they would only scan for keywords and just look at the top 10 applicants. Most of the time they said, well, usually I would at least scan each resume for seconds, a minute, although they would admit that if they had a very high volume or they were doing temp to permanent hiring where it's high volume and very fast paced, they would really rely on the ATS even though they knew that it's not 100% accurate in terms of finding the best candidate. So eventually, though, the resume is going to be viewed by a human being, and this is why I don't recommend using keyword stuffing with white text, which we're going to talk about in a second. We'll talk about the formatting and how to deal with that, because eventually a human being can see all of that, and it just is going to look kind of silly. So that's why you have to be thoughtful, and also because these scanners now are much smarter and they're looking at the full context of these keywords, so it's not going to help just to reiterate and copy and paste the job description into your resume. Again, too, at the end of the day, the recruiter is going to be using all this data and making reports to figure out what was the most useful way to do their hiring, what was the most efficient, what was the best in terms of finding candidates. And so this can be used in a number of different ways to keep track of talent management, track of the date of hire, their promotion, whatever internal trainings they've completed, and so on. So the most important thing, and I see there's a ton of questions about this, is, well, what do we do about formatting so that the ATS will actually read these resumes correctly if they're going to go through the system? So we talked about a lot of this already, but generally, to be on the safe side, we've heard that MS Word is safer. I did talk to several ATS companies that assured me that PDFs are scannable, but there's some that don't use them, and so just again, to be safer, and since we don't know which would be the best one, it is simpler to use something that is editable text that can be scanned easily, and certainly not an image, because the image files, from everybody I've talked to, very rarely do those translate into the ATS. So as another example, I recently had a client where he had a beautiful resume and had made his name into a logo with an image, like a GIF or GIF or whatever it was. And so that's all well and good, and it looked really pretty to the human eye, but to the ATS, we didn't know the name of the person applying because it's an image, and that's not going to scan correctly. So it's very crucial to make sure that the most important words, the most important information is at least not only in an image. You can use all kinds of other formatting to have it look pretty. Some ATS will allow the recruiter to see the original image of the resume that was submitted exactly as it was submitted, and some don't. So again, you can use formatting, you can include eye-catching style, divider lines, and so on, but just stay away from over-formatting it, stay away from using text boxes. That can mess things up. Consider that the system is likely to read everything from left to right, so if you have columns in some way where the text is not easy to figure out, that can garble all the text if you're using column formats or other strange formatting. A lot of the dates they recommend to use actually writing out the month, which I know takes up a lot more space on the resume. And we would want to put in the month and year just to make sure that it's readable. And put in the graduation month and year, not the attendance years for school. For work experience, you do need to list the start and end month and year so they can calculate how much time you spent in each job. And here's another thing that's new, or relatively new, is that we used to have a very strict one-page rule. But again, if the resume is not even being really viewed by a human right off the bat, and if you get, more words that match the posting are better, then, I don't feel as strongly about sticking to only one page if it's going through ATS systems, because, again, maybe you need that second page. It should have relevant, important content. But if it goes over a page in order to get you more keywords, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So Cheryl, what are some of the other formatting things we should keep in mind on resumes?
Oh, sure. I'm a nationally certified resume writer, and I sit on the certification board. So I am very, very familiar with ATS optimized resumes, and I actually grade certification exams to make sure they are ATS optimized. So some of the things we want to remember are that not all applicant tracking systems can identify and read headers and footers. Some do, some don't. So please do not put important content in a header or a footer. If you want to put page 2 in the bottom of a footer on page 2, that's fine, it's not that important. But do avoid headers and footers. You can bold, you can underline, and you can use different fonts. If you use a different font, make sure it's a sans serif font and a typical font, not like Disney font, which I did have a student use and it came up garbly-gook. White font. Do not keyword stuff, like Heather said, with white font. Most of the applicant tracking systems turn white font black, and they will see that you have input the job and typed all of the words in the bottom of the resume in white font to hide them. Don't hide them. You look like a cheater. It really brings the student's integrity into question. If the student truly has that experience, truly has those skills, it should be in black font, boldly somewhere, proudly stated in the resume. Like Heather said, functional resumes just don't work because they omit dates, and recruiters will say, when did you do that? Where did you do that? It's also, they're kind of known for hiding ancient dates or unemployment, or what we tend to say in our family, sleepaway camp. That just means jail, but it's a nicer phrase, sleepaway camp. Details do matter. Double check your spelling, double check the grammar, capitalization, hyphenation, accuracy. Like Heather said, section titles need to be typical, like education, professional experience, not something crazy that you make up. And not to beat a dead horse or anything, but yes, the resumes will need to be customized for each position, because each position might be requiring different skills of that student. We have quite a lot of questions, So Heather, I'm thinking what we should maybe do is go ahead and jump to the questions. I'm hoping that what everyone's learned today, they can share with their students.